Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where staying silent is often mistaken for strength, where people are applauded for being low maintenance, for going with the flow, for not making things complicated. But what if I told you that silence, when it comes at the cost of your truth, doesn't make you strong, it makes you invisible? Tonight, I want to talk about something most of us weren't taught: the incredible power of speaking up. Not to argue, not to prove a point, but to stand in your worth, because self-respect isn't something you ask others to give you, it's something you give yourself the moment you decide your voice matters. When we avoid difficult conversations, we tell ourselves we're keeping the peace. We rationalize our silence by thinking it's not the right time, or that bringing things up might make the situation worse. In the moment, it feels easier to stay quiet, to smooth things over, or to wait for things to somehow work themselves out. But the truth is, when we avoid these uncomfortable discussions, we're not protecting our relationships, we're slowly weakening them from the inside out. Every time we choose not to speak up when something hurts, bothers, or confuses us, we create a small emotional gap. At first, it's barely noticeable. We brush it off, move on, and pretend everything's okay. But those gaps don't disappear. They widen over time. They become the unspoken tension, the subtle resentment, the distance we can't quite explain. And when left unaddressed, they quietly build a wall between us and the people we care about. It doesn't matter how strong your connection was in the beginning. If you consistently avoid hard truths, the bond will start to deteriorate, because relationships thrive on understanding, and understanding requires communication. When something is bothering you and you say nothing, you're not just hiding your feelings, you're also denying the other person the chance to understand you, support you, or grow with you. We often assume that speaking up will hurt the other person, or that it will make things awkward or confrontational. But what really damages relationships is what happens when you don't speak. When you keep swallowing your needs, when you minimize your emotions, when you pretend everything's fine, you're not solving anything. You're just shifting the weight inward, and that weight accumulates. Eventually, it turns into passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, or even explosive reactions that seem to come out of nowhere. Avoidance teaches others not how to love you better, but how to misread you completely. People can't fix what they don't know is broken. They can't change what they don't even know is hurting you. And over time, you become less and less honest, not just with them, but with yourself. You begin to doubt your own needs, suppress your voice, and settle for a version of the relationship that's more about keeping things calm than keeping things real. This creates a false harmony. Everything looks okay on the surface, but underneath, something is quietly falling apart. You may still be spending time together, still exchanging messages, still smiling in photos, but the emotional closeness has been replaced by performance. You're no longer being fully yourself, and the other person doesn't even realize it. The intimacy, the connection, the authenticity, it all fades, not because of one big argument, but because of 1,000 tiny moments that were never spoken. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to find your way back. What could have been addressed with a 10-minute conversation now feels like an impossible mountain to climb. The silence becomes the new normal. The relationship may still exist in form, but the function, the real connection, begins to dissolve. What's tragic is that many relationships end not because people stopped loving each other, but because they stopped being honest with each other. Love needs more than emotion, it needs communication. And communication isn't just about the easy things, it's about the hard things. It's about trusting the relationship enough to say, "This upset me," or "I need something different," or "Can we talk about what's really going on?" It's about choosing discomfort in the short term for the sake of truth, growth, and deeper understanding in the long term. Avoiding difficult conversations may keep things quiet, but it doesn't keep them whole. Over time, silence becomes the loudest thing in the room, and when that silence grows too big, it's no longer a sign of peace, it's a sign that the connection has gone missing. Clarity doesn't arrive in moments of silence or in the comfort of avoidance. It comes when we find the courage to step into the unknown, to ask the question we're afraid of, to hear the answer we might not like, and to say the words that have been sitting heavy on our chest. We crave certainty. We want to understand where we stand with people, with situations, and with ourselves. But we wait for that clarity to show up on its own, as if time alone will somehow deliver it without effort or risk. But that's not how it works. Clarity demands bravery. It requires us to walk into conversations not knowing how the other person will react, not knowing if we'll be understood, or if our honesty will be received with kindness or discomfort. We want things to be clear, but we don't want to go through the mess of making them that way. And that's the irony. Clarity is not passive. It's created, not granted. And it's created through moments of courage that often feel terrifying in the moment. It could be the courage to ask someone, where do we really stand? Even when you fear they might not say what you want to hear. It could be telling someone, I'm not happy with this dynamic anymore, knowing that they might pull away. It might even be admitting to yourself, this is not enough for me, and facing the pain of walking away. These are not easy things to say or feel, but the price of never saying them is far heavier. Without courage, we live in limbo. We overthink, replay scenarios in our minds, analyze every word or gesture, trying to extract meaning from what hasn't been clearly said. We interpret silences, read into vague responses, and confuse assumptions for truths. And that mental loop becomes exhausting. It eats away at our peace, our self-esteem, and our ability to make empowered choices. We end up staying in situations that aren't right for us simply because we're too afraid to ask the question that would force us to face the truth. But the moment you choose courage, something shifts. Even if the answer hurts, even if the truth challenges your comfort zone, you finally have something solid to stand on. You no longer have to guess, to wait, or to live in the exhausting space of uncertainty. You can finally move. Whether that means moving forward, moving on, or simply moving differently. Clarity gives you the power to make real decisions, to protect your energy, and to stop pouring effort into something that may never give you what you need. Courage also brings clarity within yourself. Sometimes it's not about getting answers from others. It's about getting honest with yourself, about why you're tolerating less than you deserve, about why you're afraid to speak up, about what you truly want, even if it feels inconvenient or unrealistic. Self-honesty is one of the hardest forms of courage. It means confronting your patterns, your fears, and your excuses. It means letting go of what's comfortable in order to chase what's meaningful. What often surprises people is that clarity isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up in dramatic moments or life-shattering revelations. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the calm that comes after finally expressing how you feel. It's the peace of knowing you've done your part, said your truth, and can now walk away, or deeper in, with your head held high. That sense of calm doesn't come from having everything figured out. It comes from no longer hiding from what you already know deep down. The longer we delay courageous moments, the longer we delay the clarity that could free us, and while courage may cost us something in the moment, comfort, approval, even relationships, it always gives us something more valuable in return, truth. And with truth comes freedom, the freedom to move forward with direction, to stop doubting what we feel, and to trust that whatever clarity brings, whether it's closure or connection, it is always better than confusion. Clarity is a gift, but it's one we only receive when we're willing to be brave enough to seek it. And once we do, everything begins to change, not always easily, not always instantly, but always for the better. Self-respect isn't something you find by accident. It's something you build, brick by brick, through the choices you make, especially in the moments when it would be easier to stay quiet? Every time you speak up for yourself, even when your voice shakes, even when you're afraid of the outcome, you send a powerful message to yourself that your feelings matter, that your needs are valid, and that you are worthy of being heard. This is where self-respect grows, not in the moments of comfort, but in the moments of discomfort where you choose truth over silence. There are countless situations where staying silent seems like the more peaceful option. You don't want to start an argument. You don't want to seem too sensitive or too demanding. You don't want to rock the boat. So you swallow the comment, you laugh off the disrespect, you pretend you're fine. But something inside you always knows the truth. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, the weight of your own voice being suppressed. And the more often you silence yourself to make others comfortable, the more distant you become from your own sense of self. Respecting yourself doesn't always look loud. It's not about being confrontational or constantly defending yourself. It's about choosing not to abandon yourself in situations where it would be easier to disappear. It's about not minimizing your needs just to maintain connection, not pretending to agree just to avoid rejection, and not apologizing for having standards that protect your well-being. When you speak up, you reclaim your place in the room. You stop being a passive participant in your own life and start being an active, conscious presence. Many people fear that speaking up will push others away, and sometimes it does, but that isn't a sign that you were wrong to speak. It's a sign that the relationship was only sustainable when you were willing to stay silent. When you start honoring yourself, not everyone will clap. Some people liked you better when you didn't say no, when you didn't ask for more, when you made their comfort a priority over your own boundaries. But losing the approval of people who only liked you quiet is not a loss. It's a clearing, a making of space for those who will love you in your fullness, not just your compliance. There's also a deep internal shift that happens when you begin to advocate for yourself. You stop looking for external permission to be okay with how you feel. You stop needing validation from others to trust your gut. Instead, your self-respect begins to function like an inner compass. You feel less lost, less desperate for acceptance because you've already accepted yourself. That internal alignment makes every no stronger, every boundary clearer, and every yes more intentional. Speaking up is especially powerful in the moments when it's hardest to do, when you're scared of the fallout, when you feel like you might be misunderstood, when you're facing someone you deeply care about. But that's exactly when it matters most, because speaking up isn't just about the words. It's about the message underneath those words. I will not betray myself to stay connected to you. I am willing to risk discomfort in the name of honesty. I am allowed to take up space in this conversation, in this relationship, in this life. Self-respect doesn't mean you always get the result you want. The person might not agree. The situation might not change. But that's never the point. The point is that you didn't hide, you didn't shrink, you showed up for yourself, and that matters, because with every act of honesty, your relationship with yourself deepens. You trust yourself more, you stand taller, you stop second, guessing whether you're allowed to ask for more. In the end, the person who benefits the most from your courage to speak up is you, not because everyone will listen, not because every outcome will be perfect, but because you'll no longer be in the habit of silencing yourself to keep the peace. And when you stop doing that, something incredible happens. You finally find peace within yourself. That's where self-respect lives, and once you've found it, you won't settle for anything less. Self-respect doesn't show up in grand gestures or perfect words. It shows up in the moment you refuse to stay small. When you speak, even if your voice shakes. When you choose truth, even if it costs you comfort. When you stop needing permission to feel what you feel. Because the day you start standing up for yourself is the day your life begins to reflect your value. And from that moment on, you're no longer asking the world to respect you, you're showing them how. Thank you